Hi, welcome to Paolo's podcast. This is our third episode based off of our platform and our non-for-profit campaign, Concussions, Pain, Mental Health Awareness. Three subjects that we're really trying to lend out to the community to help them with coping skills and different resources that they might not have access to that can help them with their maybe the crisis them or a loved one or a friend is going through. And I am talking solely through our research that we do through our apprentice program and my personal stories. Look kind of funny today, and I do have my insecurities that I've been mentioning in the past about my weight and that I put on. And also today, so I'm wearing, call it my Sinbad cap. It's a headache ice pack and sunglasses because due to my sports concussions, I have TBI, and you could follow the story on their Paolo story, so I don't have to go too far into it because today's podcast, we have about 3 chapters that we're going to be discussing, and the subject matter is dealing with addiction, alcoholism, or self-medication and dependency. I'm pretty much going to tell you the story that my personal journey through it. I don't believe people say, okay, there's a stereotype for everything, and I really don't believe in labels, and especially if it's a national crisis, addiction and dependency. It doesn't discriminate. It attacks everyone, and it has no boundaries. I do believe that it is a little bit genetic. So if you have a precursor of your mother or father suffers from dependency issues, those might be a trend or a signal that you have to be extra conscious if have a drink or get involved in any medications, have a chain reaction to something else. But my story comes from is a perfect example of that there was no real history with my family. I grew up pretty much middle class. I never wanted for anything. My father was very hardworking, for about 4 or 5 credits away from his doctorate's degree, his PhD, and he was a vice president of a junior college university. He was one of my heroes to this day. Has kept me in the game. But neither of my parents smoked, drank, or did anything. And I was a former athlete, amateur athlete, that played amateur sports, I believe, at the highest level. I was an all-state wrestler. I was a football player. I played rugby, and I boxed over in London while I was attending university in London. As a lot of kids and parents might be aware, their children, when they hit high school, they might be going to a keg party, a social event, and it's kind of cool. It's only a beer as long as they're not driving. Some people I know from a lot of kids I used to work with, I used to just talk to them straight, and I didn't tell them about my past history. But I talked to them. I said, listen, I'm not going to be around you 24/7. If you do work out, here's the pros and cons of go to that keg party and you drink. And most of the athletes that came to me had really high standard goals. They wanted to play D1 and get a scholarship or be an All-American and play at the highest level. So 99% of them, I would say, would be listen to my advice. But then I could see it on the next day of the training when we would have workouts if they, had a good time over the weekend and partied a little bit. But instead of me breaking them down and lecturing them like father was, I would talk to him more as a peer and a mentor. And I would say, look, you feel like crap today. It's hurting your performance, which is your parents are paying for these workouts. And when you do drink, and it doesn't really matter how much you hydrate. And I'm not even talking about other drugs because at that point I didn't have any experience with any of my clients doing any those street drugs or other types of medications that the kids are doing now. It was basically most things that came across my plate was some of the athletes would say, hey, coach, I did have a couple of beers last night at the keg party, but I was there. And I would tell him, okay, well, now we have to worry about the after effects of it. Even though you drank last night, you don't feel too bad. We're risking about, just because you had a couple of drinks, during our workouts. Now you're going to be dehydrated, which is going to put you at risk for pulling a muscle. So I would use as an example as one night where you just wanted to fit in, feel cool, hang out with your friends, or peer pressure or the matter. You risking now all the hard work and training we're putting in, you could pop your hamstring and be out for the season. So I would kind of come at them with that approach, so I wasn't too preaching, and we would just put in the work. I wouldn't torture them that day because I wanted to make sure they didn't get injured. But that's how I handled it. Maybe if my dad knew I was at a keg party, he would have beat my ass probably, and that would have been his way of trying to do it. But he never had to worry about it because I was so in the zone of trying to meet my goals. And I wish I had the same type of discipline with my academics, to be honest. But when it came to my training ethics and my work ethic, and when it comes to sports, I followed everything to nutrition, to everything to weight training, to cardio training, keeping my body as a temple. And this carried all the way through until my last competition. And my probably last concussion was when I was 27. But now I was at the age of 30 years old, never had a cigarette, never had a sip of beer, never had a drink, never did any street drugs, never judged. I had friends of mine, parties out in California where I would go and they would always offer me the situation. I was like, no, I don't want to crap your style or be, it doesn't bother me. And I was just very confident in my own and very secure in my own ability. I didn't want to ruin their party, and it was their life, so I didn't judge anybody. But I was in control of my destiny. So, and I just didn't, if we make it to 30, I figured, all right, why start now? I was working security at that time, and I had a traumatic event happen, and I don't want to really go into that part because it would distract the story, but it really messed my head up. And because even though I was a pretty tough guy on the field, or what I thought was tough, there's always tougher guys out there. I have more of a passionate and loving heart, and I hate to hurt people and stuff like that. So this one instance was somebody got hurt really bad, and it messed with my head, and I tried to block it out. And a couple weeks went by, and I was still in really good shape, and I was going to the gym, and I was doing deadlifts, and I guess I wasn't having the correct form, and I was doing the lift, and I popped my back. The back pain was pretty bad. So I said, all right, I'll go to the doctor, because I definitely felt I tweaked it pretty hard. I'll just get it checked out. And I wasn't one to run to the doctor every 2 minutes every time, because I always had aches and pains. This was before a lot of my physical pains that I'm dealing with now at the age of 50 really started kicking in. If you look through my story and all the injuries, you'll see my body's is a mess, and all the arthritis from all the different breaks and injuries are now paying its toll. But at that point, it wasn't that bad. So I went to the doctor. They took an x-ray and my back, and they said that the vertebrae was actually had a hairline fracture in it, and it was pinching against the sciatic nerve. I really don't remember, but I believe I've had so many epidural shots, but I believe they gave me an epidural shot, and then they gave me a Vicodin or a Percocet. And I didn't even know what that was. That's how naive I was at that point. But I said, all right, it's a doctor. He's not going to give me anything that's going to hurt me. I took that, and I think I also took an anti-inflammatory too. And so I went home, and I took it as prescribed. My father asked me how it went. I said, I fractured my back, but the doctor says I'll be okay probably in about 6 to 8 weeks. But just would cut back on the training, and I couldn't work, I think, for 2 weeks because it was just hard being mobile. Those who have back problems know what I was going through. The pain was pretty high, but looking back at it, and especially the pain that I'm in now, I would not have needed to take that pain medication. But I took it because I was hurting, and I figured, all right, the doctor told me to take it. So I took it, and Now, keep in mind, I never touched anything in the past, and I was as clean as a whistle. And I had a great foundation for my family. No, there was no substance abuse issues in our family tree. Didn't really have to touch anything or have any cravings. Was never put under peer pressures by friends. Never knew anybody that was an addict or suffered from dependency either. But so I took this pill, and I I almost remember it to this day, even though I have such memory issues right now with my post TBI, and I blank, my brain freezes. It was like putting a warm blanket on my body, and I was cold, and I was so comfortable. I just felt it felt like heaven. It was like I was like, oh my God, all the pain's gone away. Now looking back at it, and I'll get into the education part of it, is that when this is, I guess, was in my DNA, this was my drug of choice, opiates. So I took the medication, and it killed the back pain. So I just was like, wow, this is great. As soon as it wore off, between 4 to 6 hours or whatever, the thing was, I immediately took another one, and it just made me have the best night's sleep. And I just loved it, and it was great. And then I don't think I was abusing the medication, and I was taking it just for the back pain. But inside, I think deep down inside my head, it was also masking a lot of my emotional and mental pain from my past trauma of my life, through high school incidents, through, if you read Close But No Cigar, my life memoirs, they'll be coming out. You'll get a better understanding of the challenging childhood I had that was pretty different than most kids go through. So the next month came by, and I had my follow-up doctor's visit. The doctor's like, "How you doing?" And I'm like, "Wow, I'm still hurting really bad, you know." So, but the medication really helped me out a lot. So, yeah, 2 refills, here, this and that, and didn't even worry about abuse issues. So I think probably it was about like 2 weeks went by. Now, instead of taking it to 4 to 6 hours, I was doubling up on the dosage because I wanted that pain to go away, but I also wanted that different feeling. And this is the hardest part that when I try to explain to loved ones and anybody else that really asks me about this question, is what is that makes you chase or get dependent on something? It's you, once you get that feeling, you want that same feeling back. Now, I never did street drugs. I never did heroin or some of the other stuff. I did the synthetic stuff, OxyContin, that I'll get into, which is supposedly the same thing. It's called the hillbilly heroin, is as a term as I heard. It's just made in the pharmacy and it's prescribed by a doctor. I took the medication, but just like anything else, your body builds up a tolerance. So now I am still not even thinking I'm an addict, because I'm still like strong, and that's, to me, in our family, we had such a prejudice against people like that were addicts or alcoholics. That was weak, and that was the lowest bottom feeders of society. That was the stigma, and that's how I was raised in my house. So actually, my father always put like this pressure on me. It's like, you could do a lot of bad things in this world, but drugs and alcohol is forbidden in our household and our family. So those were pretty easy rules to follow, right? And so, especially since I was never liked that look, and I did fall into that stereotype of anybody I saw drunk at a bar or something. Nothing ever, but they always looked disgusting to me. So I didn't want to have that type of perception. So to make a long story short on this, going how advanced it got. So I started then, went back to the doctor, and the doctor said, well, now it's been 2.5 months. You shouldn't be having this type of pain. Let's just take an Advil. And I said, well, an Advil doesn't work, and I started manipulating us because I want that feeling. He said, well, let's just start with physical rehab and do that stuff. So I didn't want to get into a confrontation. So I went to a different doctor, and I brought my x-rays, and I manipulated the story. I told him, I said, I went to a doctor, but I wasn't getting any better. But I was on medication, and then he moved me up to OxyContin, I believe. I don't know if the transition started with Vicodin, Percocet, and then OxyContin is usually the transition that, from my experience, a lot of opiate addicts go to. And then when they get cut off by their doctors, then they'll usually end up going to the streets, and then they'll end up getting heroin. So that's my experience with that. So I am now taking OxyContin, and I'm using different doctors to write the script. At that time, the laws were different. The pharmacies weren't all in connection, so they didn't know what you were doing. But I did go to the same pharmacy. It's a HIPAA rule that they actually broke, but the pharmacist was such a good man, and I would always fill the prescription like 1 week early, use every scam trick or whatever, put a smile on. Oh, Apollo, how you doing? I'm hurting really bad. And at this point, my thing probably, I had back pain, but I didn't need to be on it. But now I was definitely addicted. But it was so disgusting in my mind to hear that word. I was saying, the back's really messed up. It's all the years, and I made all these stories up. So I left, and I could tell, I actually had this weird energy and this weird feeling that he was looking at me sideways, because obviously this is probably, as a pharmacist, this is the first experience he had dealing with a pattern of somebody seeking medication. So my parents filled the pharmacy at the same time, at the same location. My pharmacist actually broke his rules and told my father, said, Larry, I'm really concerned about your son, and this could get me in a lot of trouble, but I think he's starting to get dependency, or has it. And he showed my father all the prescriptions I had filled at different pharmacies, different doctors, and the amount. And I wasn't there, but I just imagine how it just crushed and embarrassed my father. So I came in from when I was back at work, came in at work, and my mother and father and my sister was at a table. And I guess it was their idea of an intervention. And they said, you need to sit down. We have a problem. And I was like, oh, who's hurt? All these things going through my head. So they said, you got a problem with the painkillers that you're taking, you're abusing them. And I was like, what are you talking about? I get it from a doctor. I've never even had a drink. And I start manipulating. And that's what you do as an addict. We're pathological liars, basically to cover our own guilt. But we're not thinking, and I was just trying to get out of any excuse, and I believed my own stories too, and which was even worse. They said that you need help, and this is either that or it's going to kill you. And I said, well, I'm not stop working. I'll lose all my business, and I'll just stop. So, and I said, I'll prove to you I'm not an addict. So my father said, no, he goes, that's not going to work that way. We spoke to a counselor. We have to send you to a detox place for 5 days.